everyone. Welcome to another week of Research Methods and Program Evaluation, Health Science 622. It's week 3. Thank you for being patient with me through week 2. I was sick the entire time. One of the first times I got sick in a couple of years, but I appreciate your patience. We're going to actually today be talking about a couple of things, or I guess however long it takes you to watch these. And the first is reviewing the literature. There are incredible resources at Klein Library. Our health science researcher, librarian, Pamela Buzzard, gave some really amazing resources that I highly recommend you click through and try and really start to learn. I think it's called Zotero, which is a reference manager. Use reference managers. I might say that a few times today. So when we think about reviewing the literature and all of this, we have to start and think about a few questions. So what makes research original? And this is good to think about your research product as well. And so for a research project to be considered original, it needs to have only one substantive difference from previous work. So maybe it's a new exposure, a new disease or outcome, a new population, some sort of new perspective. And a lot of the time we think we need to have this huge novel idea to be research, when in reality, research builds on each other with baby steps. So when we do literature reviews, to start off and to find out if we can ask a new question, a literature review is important for a lot of reasons. It really brings so much clarity and focus to your research question or problem. You can find out what's been done and what needs to be done. They're so good for improving your research methodology or even finding a research methodology. It's really great to do a literature review to broaden your knowledge base in that research area you're interested in. I mean, you don't know what's out there until you look. And it is so important with this literature review that you'll be doing to integrate your finding with the existing body of knowledge that already exists. So we really have to remember from week 1 that each study is not standalone. We all, contribute to a larger body of knowledge, but you have to understand that body of knowledge to contribute to it. So literature reviews, they all require an extensive search of the literature. So Google Scholar, PubMed, places like that, Web of Science. And again, Pamela Buzzard goes into detail about how to do this and tips and tricks for you in those resources in week 3. Another one requires extraction of key information from those articles you found. So you have to know what the population was, when it was done, what their findings were, what their methodologies were, and conclusions. And the way we know you did this, so I guess the last thing to really think about is what's required, is this clear and concise presentation of information. So when we do a review of the literature, we have to do a topic. That's not always easy. Some topics can be way too broad, so there's thousands upon thousands of articles, or very narrow where there's not very much. So your scope has to be appropriate, and sometimes that's hard to narrow into. But again, most successful reviews have more than just a few, like 10, and less than hundreds of articles. So if we Google Scholar obesity in the United States, I can't imagine how many articles are out there. But if we Google obesity among Indigenous populations in the Southwest and the associations with physical activity, you might find something a lot smaller. So when we do reviews, there are a lot of different types of reviews. There's just kind of a general literature review, which you'll all be doing for your annotated bibliography. But then there are specific reviews that can actually be published. So a narrative review, it's really about telling a story about a topic, and it uses evidence from literature to support your plot. So you are pulling information from articles to kind of tell a story. It works best when you, as the researcher, might have a unique perspective on a topic. And it says and or, but I actually think and is really important, and a particular expertise in the field. So you need to know this literature very well. And it's not as common in the literature, but I have seen more and more of these. To put together reviews, you have some informal sources. So they're non-technical information from trusted sources. So the CDC websites give you all kinds of prevalences of many diseases. The WHO can provide helpful background on a topic. So it gives us information on a topic. So these types of things are like fact sheets, and other informal information are not really part of the formal peer-reviewed scientific literature. But they can help support a background section, give the audience an idea of what happens. And it says don't cite them in formal reports. We do that quite often in research, but we're not comparing them to the body of evidence. It's not really a contribution to the body of evidence like actual peer-reviewed articles. There are also statistical reports like the World Bank, World Development Indicators, UN agency reports. So that includes the World Health Statistics, Human Development Reports, State of the World's Children. There's also annual reports from groups like the American Cancer Society, and information from state and local health departments. These are really helpful, again, to set the stage, but not necessarily part of that body of evidence. There's also things, the way you really want to look for any sort of literature is abstract databases. So PubMed, PMC, and there's a lot of different ones to go through. Again, this is a quick summary. Pamela Buzzard really does a fantastic job in her resources. I just want to give you a brief overview. These are some subscription databases like Web of Science, Medline. A lot of these you've probably heard about and have possibly used, but you can't just access them as the general public. Us at NAU through the library resources have access to a lot of these databases. When we use these types of databases, you might like type in things like obesity and physical activity, things like that. These are keywords, and a lot of the time they're called mesh terms. So you really want to understand some of those mesh terms. There are websites, again, through Pamela Buzzard. I highly recommend looking through very thoroughly her stuff that really describes mesh terms. You've also may have heard of Boolean operators. So that's and, or not. So that includes obesity and physical activity. So you want articles that have both of those terms. Or the term or could say physical activity or obesity. So you'll actually get more results because you're saying it can either have one, the other, or both. And not would say you don't want to include certain key components. So physical activity and obesity, but not nutrition. But really carefully consider any limiters related to publication years or language. So you can really think about, well, I don't want anything before 2000, or I don't want anything that was not published in English. And that's really mostly for your reviews. So all of these places have abstracts. Sometimes you have access to full text articles, and this is really important because sometimes you have to pay to get articles. So you can find full text free versions in Google Scholar and other search engines, but not all of them are free. PubMed Central, also called PMC, and other open access places have free full text articles. There's also journal websites. And what's really important for you all is the Klein Library subscriptions. So when we use the library resources, we have paid as an institution for access to these articles. If the institution itself might not have paid for that, there's also interlibrary loans. And I highly recommend putting those requests in if you find an article that we don't have at NAU. And through our resources in our week 3, it tells us how to do that. You can also use email or what's called ResearchGate to send a request to the authors for a copy. So there, it's all different ways of doing that. And I think a lot of the time when we read these articles, I really want you to understand internal validity. So how well was the study designed, conducted, interpreted, and reported? Did you understand what they were saying? Could you follow along? Did they use the right study design? Did they use the right statistical methods? That internal validity is so important. But on the other side, you have external validity, which is just as equally important. Is it generalizable? So how likely are those results going to apply to other populations? And a lot of the time, it doesn't. And it's okay if it doesn't, but we have to be completely aware of those generalizability and external validity things. So when you're going through and putting together these studies, I want you to think about internal validity and external validity while you're putting together your literature review and your annotated bibliography. So keep these things in mind. Definitely look at all of the resources we have for you, and reach out to Pamela Buzzard. She is fantastic, or myself, and we can help in any way, shape, or form. All right, so I will see you at the next one.